Hi everyone, my name is Angela, this is Paperbacks Galore, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in March and April. Okay, the first book that I finished in March is a book called Independence. This is a historical fiction that takes place right around the time of India's independence and also partition, and I really wanted to learn more about partition in particular, which is why I got this book from Book of the Month. And when I started reading this, I had such high hopes. I thought the writing was really well crafted. I thought that the character work was great. The setting was really vivid. And we're ultimately following these three sisters. And it was really cool to see how these kind of larger historical events were affecting these individual characters. But what kind of ruined it for me was the love triangle. There's essentially a man, a boy, a young man that two of these sisters are like kind of fighting over, and one of the sisters just turns into this really pathetic kind of villainous character, and like she's just pathetic. I don't know how else to say it. Like, you can't really empathize for her because she's just being such a bitch, and she just wants like pity, and she just wants this man even though he clearly loves her sister, and she kind of like forces him into marrying her. It really took away from how interesting this book was at the beginning, so I ended up lowering my rating to a 3.75 stars, but besides the love triangle, I did really enjoy this. Okay, next up is actually the best book that I've read so far this year, and that is The Binding. Please just don't read the full synopsis. Basically, we have this character named Emmett. This takes place in essentially England in like the 1800s, and he lives on a farm with his family, and he's just found out that he's been summoned to be an apprentice for a bookbinder. And what's really weird about that is that books have always been really secretive and kind of villainized. He's always been told to be very wary of books and stay away from them. So he's like, okay, this is so strange. I thought books were bad. Why am I going to a bookbinder? And you essentially find out that there's something magical going on with these books. Books are not what they are to us in reality. There's something different with them. And that is really all you need to know. There is a very interesting queer romance in here. That's it. That's all you need to know. Okay, so just warning you not to read the synopsis, but I love this book so much. There's a part in the middle that is probably the best like 100 pages of writing that I've read in years. I was so obsessed with it. I fully plan on rereading this someday. It's the kind of book where once you get to the end, you want to go back and actually reread it to see how the ending changes everything and how you just see things differently, and just it kind of blows your mind, and you're just like left in awe of the author's craft. So I'm obsessed with this book. I love it so much. It's so unique. It's so beautifully written. It's so vivid. Please read this book. I'm obsessed with it. Next up is an audiobook. It is The Box in the Wood, which is the fourth book in the Truly Devious series. Basically, in this series, these teenagers are at this school for like really bright kids in Vermont. It's like this big, beautiful school, kind of like in the mountains, isolated, and there's a very famous murder case that happened in the 1920s that has been unsolved. And our main character, Stevie, is obsessed with true crime, and she has vowed to try to solve this unsolved case, and that's basically kind of her like final project at this school, the overarching reason why she got into this school. In this book though, we are actually at a summer camp, and there's an unsolved murder case that happened at the summer camp that Stevie is trying to solve, and her friends actually come to this camp with her. It's just a good time. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars. I didn't love it as much as the other books because the school setting in Vermont was just like chef's kiss, and also like the flashbacks to the 1920s just really worked for me. The third book was a 5-star for me, but this one was fun. I had a good time, but ultimately a little forgettable. Next up is a YA fantasy called Where the Dark Stands Still. I actually have a standalone review for this on my channel, and I also read it in a vlog. So this is essentially a cottagecore fantasy based on Polish folklore. I was really bored throughout this. I really struggled to finish it. I was just not impressed at all by anything except for I liked the writing and I liked the atmosphere. Everything else was so boring, so I ended up giving this 2.5 stars, but I actually have seen people like rave about this book and really love it, so maybe go watch my review, see if the things that I say resonate with you or not, because it actually might work for a lot of people. Next up, I read a historical romance called Rebel, and this is essentially about a woman. This is like Jim Crow era. Actually, no, it's Reconstruction era America. And so like a lot of enslaved people are now free and kind of building their lives, and we have this black woman who is trying to teach people how to read, and so she's trying to start her own school, and then she meets this really wealthy kind of debonair man, and he and his family kind of like take her in. She's new to the city and they kind of take care of her, and it's just a really sweet historical romance. I really enjoyed it. There definitely are some heavier topics having to do with like racism. Obviously there's like a white supremacist hate group in this book as well, and it is a romance book, so ultimately like everything turns out okay for the most part. It's not as dark as like another book covering these subjects, but for some readers I can definitely see this like being too heavy to be like a fun time. But I really enjoyed it. I definitely want to read more from this author because I know she has a lot of black romances set in like historical time periods, and I think that's really fun. I think I gave this one 3.75 stars. The epilogue had like this weird thing with like they were suddenly pregnant, and I was just like, why? Next up, I read Unmasking Autism by Dr. Devin Price. This is a nonfiction book that's actually meant for mostly for autistic people to read and learn how to kind of unmask their autism and be themselves and free themselves from a lot of the internalized racism, and it's obviously a lot more complex than that, and the author talks a lot about what autism is and how it is misunderstood and how autistic people are treated and how autistic people have options for trying to better their lives and the complications that come with that. I thought this was a really excellent resource. I'm not autistic myself. I wanted to read this to learn more about autism. I gave this book 5 stars. I thought it was really well done. I annotated after I read it, and I will be going back to this as a reference. I thought it was really approachable, really well written. I actually listened to the audiobook along with reading it, so the author himself narrates it, and he's also trans, so there's a very inclusive perspective in here having to do with gender identity and queerness and also race and other parts of intersectionality. So really, really excellent nonfiction. Next up, I read Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. I'm really glad this is not about math. This is the sequel to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. It very much feels like Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies Part 2 with like a different setting and slightly different fairies and plot points. I thought the plot beats were too similar. Essentially, Emily and another professor named Brambleby, something like that. His name is weird. They're basically going off into the world to study fairies and interview the townsfolk, and this time they're in Austria. And it was fun, but I was a little bit bored, and it definitely didn't live up to the first one. So 3.5 stars, a little bit of a disappointing time. The next book I listened to on audio, and I actually loved it so much that I went out and bought a physical copy. And this is Interesting Facts About Space This is a literary fiction. It's essentially a character study of our main character Enid, and we follow her over like, I don't know, a month, a couple months. And some things about Enid are that she is obsessed with true crime. She has a depressed mother who she loves very much, who she calls and tells interesting facts about space all the time. She works at some sort of space agency doing something to do with data or organizing things or something. She's not like a scientist, but she does work at a space agency. She is afraid of bald men. She is a queer woman, a lesbian specifically, and all of these aspects of her life kind of converge in this story, and we're seeing her try to figure out if she's being stalked by her bald neighbor. We see her enter a really weird but sweet romance. We see her going to therapy for the first time. It's just so good. It's just her and her friends and her family and this woman that she gets involved with, and the writing is so funny. It's just so unique. I loved it. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I actually have been going through and annotating, and I think I actually might bump it up to a 5-star after I finish annotating, because I think seeing all the lines that I love so much might make me realize that this is actually a 5-star. So yeah, highly recommend this if you're looking for kind of a character-driven book, and the audiobook is really good. Okay, next up is a 5-star, and it is Night Film by Marisha Pessl. I haven't been saying all the authors' names. I never do. I'm sorry. I'm a mess. This is a mixed media thriller, mystery, suspense novel, essentially about this famous horror director who people are obsessed with because he's very mysterious. He hasn't been seen or interviewed in like decades. His movies are so dark that they actually stopped being released in theaters, and the only way that you could see his films were like if you found like a bootleg copy, or if you went to these like secret showings of his movies, some of which were in like the Paris catacombs. And the author like actually, you know, invented these really sick and twisted movies that this fictional author or director made. And so you actually get to hear some of the synopses of these movies. And essentially, there's a journalist who's convinced that this director is evil and that he has done some really awful things in real life. And so this book is about him trying to get dirt. My cats are running through the house. He's trying to get dirt on this director. I fucking loved this book. This is honestly one of the best like mystery thriller books I've ever read. I was completely immersed in this story. It probably helped that I was listening to the audiobook while following along in the physical copy, but literally my only complaint about this book is that you don't get every single answer that you want. That's all I'm gonna say. But if you're looking for a more unique mystery thriller book, check this one out. This one has been out for a while, so it's probably available at your library. It's amazing. Okay, I went out of order on accident. I actually finished this one before Night Film. I read these both in Florida on vacation. But this is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. For context, I read Part of Your World a couple years ago, gave that 5 stars. I read Yours Truly last year and gave that 5 stars. And then this one I'm giving 4 stars. The premise is so great. So we have these two characters, I think Emma and Justin. And Emma and Justin actually have something weird in common. So Justin posts this Reddit thread about, like, you know those Reddit threads that are like, am I the asshole? And he's talking about how he is cursed. Basically, the women that he dates always end up finding their soulmates, like right after they break up. And Emma comes across this Reddit post and she's like, that happens to me too. All the guys I date, when we break up, they like find their wives, like right after. And so they start DMing each other, and eventually they agree to fake date to see if that will lead to them kind of finding their soulmate after they break up. And obviously they are the ones who fall in love. And honestly, if that were the focus of the book, it would have been 5 stars. There were definitely really funny moments, really, really sweet moments. I think Justin is that his fucking name? Yeah. Justin is super sweet. He's definitely like a golden retriever boyfriend. But both of these characters have mommy issues. And like, that's fine, but like, it wasn't just like, oh, these characters have things to work through. It was like, we are actively seeing them interact with their parents, especially Emma and her mom, and like watching this train wreck of a relationship between this mom and daughter. And like, just, it was so bogged down by the mommy issues. And I have to say, I am officially a hater of romance books that have to be focused on parental issues. Like, Emily Henry's new book also has a focus on her and her dad being like neglectful and kind of like never staying. Her mom does the exact same thing, and I'm just really tired of it. Like, there's nothing wrong with having parental issues. I just feel like it's being done in similar ways over and over and over again. That is to say, I did still give this book 4 stars. I thought it was really fun, really sweet. I could definitely feel the chemistry between these two main characters, and I wish it was a little more beachy and fun. They don't really go to the beach or the lake that often, and like have beach days or anything, but overall, a solid romance book, and one that people are loving a lot apparently, so good for you guys. Okay, I think we're moving into April now. So my next book is Green Frog, which is a short story collection by Gina Chung. I ended up giving this collection 4.25 stars. I thought this was really great. I'm not really a short story collection type of reader, but I think reading one that was all by the same author works a lot better for me than like reading an anthology where they're all different authors. So most of these stories, if not all of them, are focused on Korean or Korean American identities. They're all focused on either familial relationships or romantic relationships. A lot of them deal with complicated, like, parental issues, which I like way more in literary fiction than I do in romance. I know I was like just complaining about that, but very different in this type of collection. There's some magical realism. There's even a story that has like it's just like straight up kind of a fantasy story. My favorite stories were Human Hearts, The Arrow, and The Sound of Water. So if you do end up picking up this collection, those are my favorites. Yeah, really good, really refreshing. I would love to see her publish a full-length novel based on one of these stories, or like whatever she comes out with next, I'll be reading because I really, really liked this. Next up, I finished For Grad School, In Other Words, a course book on translation. That's a book I read. I'm not really going to talk about it, but if you want to learn about translation, that's a book. It's very accessible. I mean, not very accessible. It's definitely meant for students, but it's really interesting. Okay, next up I read the 8th book in the Veronica Speedwell series, which is called A Sinister Revenge. And this is essentially a story of, oh gosh, what's his name? Tiberius. So we have our two main characters, Veronica and Stoker, and Tiberius is Stoker's brother. And a long time ago, Tiberius had this friend group around the time of like university, and they ended up coming to his father's estate, which is kind of surrounded by these cliffs. And one of his friends was really interested in like fossils, like paleontology, and he was digging for these dinosaur bones, and he actually ended up dying on these cliffs, and it seems like somebody is killing off the members of this friend group one by one. So Tiberius invites all of the remaining friends to his late father's estate in this like southern English county, and he's basically throwing like a murder mystery, not murder mystery, but like a dinner party to try to solve the mystery of these real life murders. So kind of a real life murder mystery dinner. And this one was really fun. What did I give it? 4 stars. This was a good time. I liked the mystery. There was some tension between some characters in this book that was, I thought, really well done. If you haven't read this series, super fun. They're both natural scientists and they solve mysteries together. There's a romance and it's set in Victorian England. Super fun. This is the second book in the something series. They all start with well met, well played, well something, and they all have to do with this Renaissance fair in this small town. Every summer this Renaissance fair is held in this town, and then the performers and the vendors of the Renaissance fair kind of like move around from state to state, but the townsfolk obviously stay in the town. And so this is a romance between our main character Stacy and one of the performers, except there's kind of a catfishing element here, which I think a lot of people will really hate. But basically Stacy has been having casual sex with this guy named Dex, and he is like a super hot, muscular, kind of like Chris Hemsworth type, and she is seeing all of her friends like get engaged, and she's drunk one night and she's lonely, and she like messages him basically saying like, I want to be more than friends. And who actually answers is his cousin. His name is Daniel. So she's actually been messaging Daniel for all these months, and then next summer when he comes back, everything is revealed. And I know that sounds like a really awful plot to a romance book, and that's what I was thinking too. Like, how could you get over someone lying to you for like a year and like thinking that you're talking to one person and you're actually talking to another? I don't know, guys. I really enjoyed this. I ate this up. I gave this 4 stars. I read this in like 2 days at a time when I was really busy and probably should not have been reading. So I think that maybe there's an element of like me trying to get away from my worries and my responsibilities. But I really liked the main character and her love interest, Daniel. Daniel is so like sweet and dorky and like cute and like not in like a traditional like big muscles kind of way, and just kind of like nerdy. And I don't know, I just really liked that. And the main character was kind of like maybe like mid-size, like she's a little bit bigger, and just something about them together was just like so cute, and I was just kind of obsessed with it. I think the Renaissance setting is so much of why I've been really enjoying these books. I don't think they're like brilliantly written or anything, but they're light and fluffy. There's nothing really heavy going on in these books, and I just really liked it. I don't know. Next up is Everyone on This Train is a Suspect, which is the sequel to Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. And if you don't know, these mystery books are very meta. Like, the narrator is the main character and he's like talking at the reader, and he's like telling you that this is going to be a fair play mystery, and he's telling you like, okay, the deaths are going to happen on these pages, and in this one he's like, okay, I'm gonna say the killer's name this many times. And it's, at some point in the book, he like updates you on like how many times he said all of the like suspects' names, and you have to like try to figure it out. I didn't, because I'm too lazy for that shit, but I listened to this one on audio. The narrator and the author and the characters are Australian, so I really liked having the Australian accent in my head. And essentially we're on a train for this kind of mystery author conference, and somebody gets murdered, and so most of our suspects are actually like mystery authors, which is a really fun kind of spin, and it's very meta, and he's clearly kind of making fun of different types of mystery authors and kind of like very egotistical authors and things like that. So I thought this was fun. I gave it, what did I give this? 4 stars. Yeah, this was a really good time. I'm definitely a lover of like a quirky kind of weirder mystery, and this one definitely fit the bill. So if you like that too, you should check out this series. I did end up reading Funny Story by Emily Henry about a week before it came out. I had the e-arc of it, and then when it was published, I went out and picked up a physical copy. I will probably go back and annotate this sometime. I have a standalone review of this as well, so I'll link that below as well. This is essentially a story about two people, Miles and Daphne, whose significant others break up with them to be with each other. So now Miles and Daphne are both heartbroken, and they end up being roommates just because they used to have people that they lived with, and now they're kind of stuck, and they need, especially Daphne, needs a place to go. Daphne has actually moved to this town in northern Michigan to be with her fiance. She had like uprooted her whole life to come live here, and this is where her fiance Peter is from, and so she doesn't really know anyone. She doesn't have a network of people here, and now she's stuck in this place. So she's kind of counting down the days until she can leave throughout this whole book, and she's a librarian, so she's like, okay, after this big event that I'm planning, I'm leaving because I don't know anyone here. This is not my hometown. Like, why am I still here if Peter dumped me? And so eventually she and Miles actually decide to pretend like they're dating because their exes are kind of being very like sanctimonious and like, oh, you poor thing, like you're so sad and miserable, like I'm so sorry for you, like I really feel you. And they're like, fuck you, I'm happy, I'm dating someone else who's super hot, and we're gonna come to your wedding. They invite them to the wedding. Isn't that crazy? So yeah, I really loved this book. This is now my second favorite Emily Henry. I love that it's in northern Michigan. The setting was so vivid to me. I love that Miles is a little bit less put together and traditional than a lot of her other male main characters. The only thing I hated was the stuff with Daphne's dad and the daddy issues. I was just over it. But overall, I fucking love this. I gave it 5 stars, and I will be rereading this Sunday. For sure. And the last book that I completed in April was Pardon My Frenchie by Farah Roshan, which comes out, I believe, on June 4th. And this is a really, really cute book. So we have our two main characters, Ashanti and Thaddeus. He goes by Thad. And basically she owns a doggy daycare center, and he is he's just retired from the military, and he wants to start his own business as well with his friend. It's kind of like a bar for veterans to come and hang out and socialize with each other and kind of build a community. And so Thaddeus has, moved back to New Orleans, and his grandmother is a frequent customer of Ashanti's doggy daycare, and his grandmother's not doing well, so one day he shows up to pick up his grandmother's dog, and he really comes off as an ass. Like, I was like, I don't like this man. But he definitely grew on me. So it really was like a grump sunshine dynamic. I appreciated that he was actually grumpy and like seemed like a not very nice guy at first, and then you kind of get to know him and you understand why he came off that way. And essentially, this book is so stupid, but like so cute. Essentially, this viral moment happens between Ashanti's dog and Thaddeus's grandma's dog, and they use this viral opportunity to like promote their businesses. So they like go on these talk shows and like on the local news, and they get thrown together, and obviously they fall in love. This was so light and fluffy. This is like the opposite of this. I mean, this is like funny. This was so funny, right? But it was also like exploring some heavier, emotional things. Whereas Pardon My Frenchie was just fun. Like, there's like a tiny, tiny bit of serious stuff, but even that serious stuff is like pretty low stakes, and like everything's gonna be fine. So if you're looking for like a true fluffy romance with no third act breakup, Pardon My Frenchie. I do want to mention one book that I unfortunately DNF'd, which is To Shape a Dragon's Breath. This is I think it's kind of like Fourth Wing, but from an indigenous perspective, taking place in the 1840s. And that sounds like my perfect book, but I didn't realize that this was YA fantasy. So I actually did end up DNFing this, unfortunately, but I think this could really work for a lot of people. I was just really bored because this young indigenous woman has to go to this dragon academy that the colonizers, run. And she is, obviously facing a lot of racism and discrimination and like misunderstanding of her culture in general. But once we got to the school, we're just sort of like at school with her, and I was really bored and I just couldn't make myself continue, so I decided to put this down, unfortunately, but I could return to it someday, maybe. Those are all the books that I read in March and April. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will have all those videos I mentioned linked down below. Subscribe if you want to see more content from me, and I hope you have a lovely week. Bye!